In the 6 months we've had this little Veloster, we've covered a bit over 6,000 k's in it. Sadly, its time is up. Initially, we had a lot planned for this car. We wanted to go to the racetrack to see if it performs out there, as well as take it on a long road trip out to country New South Wales. However, we took delivery of this car right at the start of the COVID-19 lockdowns. That means we were sadly unable to do those things. What we will do today, however, is analyse this car's shortcomings, as well as look at the areas of merit to see whether it doubles as a good family car, as well as a sports car. Just as a recap, our model is the Hyundai Veloster Turbo Premium, which starts from $42,410 before on-roads. Our car, however, is equipped with a couple of options. Those include the striking Thunderbolt yellow paint, which will set you back $595, and a contrasting black roof, which is a $1,000 luxury. Over the life of this loan, I've come to really like this little Veloster. Now, I make a big omission up front. I initially judged this car a little bit prematurely. I thought it was some pseudo sports car and I let that sort of cloud my judgment, but the more time I spent with it, the more I learned to like it. I've been absolutely amazed at how many people have been ogling at this car. The average punter thinks it's really, really sporty. I've had my neighbour across the road coming over Sticky Beat. I've caught school kids coming and pointing and gesturing at it. It's been universally received as sporty. Now, I think there might be a few things. The bright paint helps, obviously. Contrasting roof, opening sunroof, great design, large wheels, and an awesome centre exhaust at the back. All of these things scream sports car, and everyone else seems to agree too, for that matter. A question we had at Car Advice, and a lot of you readers had too for that matter, was is this third door actually usable? So I've spent a bit of time with this car, and to be honest, I think it is. We have my child seat in here, and as a family of 3, I found the Veloster super usable. With one child in the back, nice and easy. Don't have to muck around with the side seat. I can load my kid in, not a single drama. If you want to use the other seat, however, with a child seat, bit of a problem. You have to fold the front seat forward, and that's a bit of a pain in the bum. You've got to use the electric slider for about 5 minutes, pull the latch, and then when you put it back, you lose your memory. Not only that, there's not a great stack of room coming in from the driver's side either. So with a baby seat on board, consider it a 3-seater. Now, as a 4-seater without a child seat, there are still a couple of issues. There is that big tunnel down the middle which houses the cup holders. Now, it might be great for the passengers on board, but trying to get in over this way as an adult can be very difficult. Family of 3 with a child seat, this car looks great. You can actually use it. Family of 4 with 2 little kids, also good. You can probably get away with getting over the tunnel there. They'll enjoy it too. As a young adult with adult friends using this back seat all the time, I'd recommend against it. You're probably better off buying a 5-door car like an i30N as a good performance alternative. Once you've climbed in the back, room in here is not too dissimilar from a small hatchback. This is my driving position, and I've got a good couple of centimetres of legroom, which isn't too bad. One shortcoming, however, is this roof line. Now, this is a turbo premium model, so it gets a factory sunroof, so naturally it gobbles up a bit of headroom when you put this item in, but they've done their best to deeply sculpt the roof here to save you, so there is some room at the back here. One thing, however, is you cannot avoid this low roof line and the low raked roof line of this sports car style. So you notice here that the roof line comes down, which sort of limits your visibility, and you've got quite a small quarter window, which can be a bit of a pain for some. Other things, we've got some storage area here, which is nice. No rear air vents, bit of a pain. No USB ports, also a bit of a pain. A cup holder, that sort of becomes useless if you're trying to get in and out of the car because you can't put anything in it. And a deep storage area for a phone or some knickknacks. The seats are a bit firm in this car and a little bit hard, so I wouldn't want to spend too much time back here. There are also ISOFIX points on either side in case you want to put 2 seats in this car. Standard inclusions are typical of a high-end Hyundai, and as you can see on screen, there is a heap of nifty trinkets on board. Once you've experienced some of these niceties on board, you'll find it hard to go without them. The great thing about these long-term loans is that, given that heaps of people are driving them day in, day out, different people, different shapes, different sizes, it really accelerates the wear on a car. It gives you an idea of what it's like for a car to be maybe 3 or 4 years of ownership with one person versus us for 6 months. So, what have we found? Now, plastics. On the door card here, you've got this textured trim plastic and this window switch area. There's a bit of wear going on here, be it from people wearing rings, people from grabbing it, using their nails, whatever it might be, but there is a little bit of wear occurring. On the topic of materials, however, interesting point, you've got this mesh material here. On the opposite door, you've got a completely different material. Consider it quirks of the asymmetric nature of the Veloster. A few other things too. Plastic on the handbrake, no leather. Plastic on the center console too, no leather here. Bit of a shame really. Something that you lean on, you would like it to be nice and soft. There are some real good points though. This steering wheel is awesome. Nice and thin, I like a good thin steering wheel. Good area to put your thumbs and rest them so you don't have to tangle them up in the wheel, also good. Lots of legible controls. It might look like there is a heap of controls, but they're actually really intuitive and really easy to use. You've got your dedicated infotainment here with your mode, voice control for Siri or Apple CarPlay, voice tracks and Bluetooth. And over on this side, the trip computer, everything is divided and nice and easy to use and understand. One thing, however, are these red anodized sort of finishes. Now, this cabin isn't overly sporty for what is a $41,000 car. And these matte red highlights, to some they might look a bit cheap. I don't like them personally. You might love them, up to you. But there's no gloss black or too much contrast going on here. It's just a little bit bland with splashes of color. I would love to see a bit more going on here, be it some padding on the dash or some red stitching or some other vinyl elements included, would definitely lift this cabin up a bit more. Infotainment wise, it's pretty good. Apple CarPlay is great, user interface is great, inbuilt navigation is also pretty good. There's an Infinity sound system on board with this car. It doesn't sound too bad, to be honest, quite trebly, not too much bass, got a wireless charger, USB port and 12 volt down below too. What's great is heated and ventilated seats for the driver and passenger. On the topic of these seats, they've weared relatively well over the time we've had it. There's a slight amount of wear occurring on this bolster, nothing too out of the ordinary. They're not the most supportive seats, however. It would be nice to have some bolster pews that sort of hold you in place, but these seats aren't that. They are comfortable, however, as a side note. Instrumentation is good. Nice and clear and visible, good digital speed readout in the middle. The dials have a nice textured finish to it, adds a bit of sportiness, and there is a head-up display. However, it projects onto a clear perspex pane. Now, some people don't like having that in front of them obscuring their vision, even though you can see through it, I understand that. The good thing about this system, however, is that with a pair of polarized sunglasses, the head-up display remains clear and visible, even in bright daylight. It does have a few nice party tricks. One is the opening electric sunroof. Now, I enjoy a good sunroof, maybe not in Queensland where it's a bit hot, but down here in Sydney, it's great. So it's a good, nice luxury item to have in a car like this. To sum it up, there's been a lot to love about having this car, especially during winter. The heated seats have been great. Heated steering wheel has also been great. Extra light from the sunroof, awesome. The sound system, also pretty good too. Lots of nice things going on, making it very pleasant to drive. Heads-up display, clear instrumentation. It's just an easy car to get around town in. However, a couple of shortcomings. Materials, not the best, and these seats, I just wish they were a little bit more sporty and in keeping with the character of the car. Access to the Veloster's boot is actually hidden up here. Nice little handle to lift the boot up. Its space is about 300 litres, give or take 60-70 litres less than the Kona. Not as big as an i30 for that matter. Space-wise, it's not too wide, but it is nice and deep, so you can stack your luggage, and there's a nice cargo net that comes with the car, which is handy. One thing though, it is a bit of a hassle to use the full area by folding the second row seats, as that when you do, they hit the first row. Bit irritating, to be honest. Under the one level boot floor is a space-saving spare wheel with all associated tools needed to change a tyre. Another thing I mentioned is that these boot plastics do show scratches a bit, so be a bit careful if you're loading sharp objects in and out of the boot quite frequently. Powering the Veloster Turbo is the same engine from the Hyundai i30 N-Line model. This is a 150 kilowatt turbocharged 4-cylinder with peak power coming in at 6,000 RPM. Its torque figure is 265 Nm, available from just 1500 RPM up to 4500 RPM. So, let's take this car for a drive to see whether its sporty nature comes through with its on-road behaviour. Let's cover off some of the basic things first, and some of the things that you just learn to live with. Rear visibility is quite compromised. That rear window is small. There's also a bit of a blind spot over the rear left quarter. Luckily, these large mirrors do well to alleviate any concerns there. Other things too, sitting position, steering position. Both of these are great. You're comfortable behind the wheel, you sit quite low, it does feel quite sporty, quite engaging. There's a lot of adjustment in the steering wheel so you can get nice and comfortable, both reach as well as height. Awesome. Now, I've done a long stint in this car, about 2.5 hours, and I didn't feel too fatigued. The driving position and sitting position complements that. It's nice and comfortable to be in, you don't feel like everything's out of the way, nothing's too over the top. It's a nice, easy car to drive. Another point that leads into that is the way it rides. It's surprisingly comfortable despite being a sporty-ish car on some large wheels. It soaks up the road nicely and it covers ground really well, but it does have that nice sporty edge to it, which is just what you want. One thing that surprised me about this Hyundai Veloster is the way it turns in, or more importantly, the way the steering feels. Now, the front end on this car is incredibly composed. I'd argue and say that it's almost as composed as that from the i30N, which is a much more high-performance, hotter version of this sort of car. It gives you a sense of confidence. You gain a nice connection with the car, and it remains quite driver-focused. Now, let's talk about that dual-clutch transmission. With the first few attempts of using it, and maybe for the first week of ownership, you might find yourself manifesting hesitations and lurches. Now, read the manual and also read the little card that comes with it in the glove box. There's a simple way to avoid all of this with the car, and you can learn to drive with it. If you come to a stop, coming to a set of lights, and there's a gap that's opened and you want to take it, make sure you apply a little bit of accelerator before bearing the throttle. If you find yourself being really stabby with the throttle input, applying heaps of it all the time, you can create these situations. Treat it like a manual, be gentle with it at the start, and it will reward you with smooth driving. One thing, however, is that exhaust. It sounds absolutely woeful, almost like a vacuum cleaner. Now compared to the i30N, it's a total juxtaposition. The i30N is loud, raucous, and if anything more in keeping with what the character should be for the Veloster. If there's one thing from this that Hyundai could learn, it's put that exhaust on this car. It'll make it an extra bit more exciting. Our managing editor, Trent Nikolic, also spent a bit of time behind the wheel of the Veloster during the loan. Let's see what he has to say.
Now it might surprise some of you, but we're actually big fans of the Hyundai Veloster at Car Advice, and I quite like it myself, despite the fact that yes, the styling's a little bit funky. And funnily enough, for me, the way I see it, the biggest competition that the Veloster's got in the Australian market is the Hyundai i30, which is a particularly good small hatchback. So if you move aside from that and say, okay, I'm going to get the Veloster, not the i30, why are you buying it? Well, we've obviously done a hell of a lot of driving around town, which is where I am now. With the whole COVID thing, we would have liked to have been able to do more driving, especially country driving, but we've had to limit that as much as possible for a large part of the duration of our time with the Veloster. However, around town, there's a couple of things that really make a hell of a lot of sense. One is that third door. Now, in isolation, you might look at it and go, it's a bit silly, but if you do occasionally need to use that second row, it's particularly handy in the city to be able to just pull up, open the third door, someone jump in that second row, and away you go. And you don't have to worry about folding seats forward and having all the issues that you potentially have with a two-door car. So it makes a lot of sense when you actually get down to it and use it. The other area that I think it really shines, and you do notice this too once you get out of the city onto more rural roads, is the ride and handling tune. So once again, a fantastic job done by the guys and girls at Hyundai to get this vehicle balanced nicely between comfort and handling, because it's not an out-and-out sports car, but it's got a bit of sporting pretension about it, and as such, it needs to handle and ride reasonably well. It needs to handle reasonably well, regardless of the fact that you might not look at it as a sports car. So this does handle in a fun and safe way when you sort of push it a little bit harder on a twisty road. But crucially, if you're driving it around town on our pretty average road network, it rides really comfortably well. It doesn't bang and crash over all the little potholes and marks in the road and, you know, dividers and things like that. It's actually pretty comfortable. So I think all round, the Hyundai Veloster makes a hell of a lot of sense. It's something different. It stands out from the typical hatchback brigade. And you know, in Australia, where we buy cars a lot on style and design and what we like personally, I think this says something about you as a driver, that you want to drive something a little bit different and you don't want to drive a hatchback that everybody else drives. So it's been a short loan. We haven't had it quite as long as we'd like, but we have really enjoyed our time with it. And I'd urge you, if you're looking at something like a Hyundai i30, or if indeed you're looking at a small hatchback, take a look at a Veloster, because it's something different.
We hope you've enjoyed this video and that we've earned a few subscriptions from you, our viewers. After spending a bit of time behind the wheel of this thing and getting to know it, it's actually not that bad of a car. People initially write it off as a bit of a one-trick pony or pseudo sports car, but you know what? There's a lot to like here. It looks great. The reception that we've got from people driving this car has been excellent. So if you want to be a bit individual and have something a bit sporty, this car delivers more than, say, an i30N would. Second thing is the front end on this car and the amount of grip it has. It actually can be a good sports car. On a good road, it's a bit of fun. However, there are a couple of shortcomings. That transmission on the downshifts could be better. The interior quality is not quite there. So, if you like to march to the beat of your own drum, want to be a bit individual, but want to retain a bit of practicality, the Veloster might be the right 3-door, 4-door car for you.